welcome to the December 2021 NATS Chat. I'm Kari Ragan, the organizer and moderator of NATS Chats, which are sponsored by Inside View Press. And today is also sponsored by the Voice Foundation. And I am thrilled to be joined by my dear friend and colleague, John Nix, who I've asked to help facilitate and co-host this NATS Chat. So thank you, John, for joining us today. And then, of course, my esteemed guest, Christian Herbst, joining us from Vienna, and Jan Svec, joining us from Olomouc, Czech Republic. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Yeah,
nice to be here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, your articles, not only the ones, the Snake Pit articles, which I will put, in fact, I'll put them in the chat box right now for everyone's references, were so remarkable, and that's what we're going to unpack a little bit. And of course, the article that you co-authored on glottal configurations, which I'll also drop in the chat box in a moment. So we're thrilled to be here and talk with you about it. I would like to begin, though, with a little beyond the bio conversation. Just, we all can read your incredible bios, but I would like to know what has led you to your passion of voice, led you into voice science. What is a little bit of your backstory? Christian, would you like to begin?
Yeah, gladly. So I started singing when I was 6, and this kind of never left me. And actually, my first wish as a profession was Papageno, but that didn't work out for some reasons. And then I studied vocal pedagogy. I have a major in classical vocal pedagogy and taught some, I would say, 5,000 lessons plus in my life. And at a certain point, I was not satisfied with smelling the rose and these kinds of things. And I really got interested in how does the damper really work. And then I had one particular question that nobody could answer me. And that turned out to be my dissertation topic, and that turned out to be the one article that you referred to, Kari. So it's kind of, I wasn't born a scientist, and sometimes I think I'm still not a scientist, and my heart is, at my heart, I'm still a singer. So I have a huge passion for this, and my other passion is for, if I may say this, for the truth, whatever that is. So and I think scientific method gives us such nice tools to really be careful and be skeptical and be doubtful of things and go further and further. And if I may, having said this, we can all be, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone to the PASS conference that we're gonna host in Vienna, February 24 to 26. And let me just, am I sharing my screen now?
You are.
So,
Yes.
So it's the 7th International Physiology and Acoustics of Singing Conference. This is a format that has been held biannually since I think 2002 or something like that, 2003, but has unfortunately discontinued for the past 10 years. So we're gonna bring this back to action. It's a purely virtual event, so registration is really cheap, actually. So early bird period has been extended to December 19. It's 90 euros for regulars and 40 euros for students. So please do join us. We're gonna have a fantastic program. We have 3 fantastic keynotes, 3 special sessions. Actually, Jan is hosting one of the special sessions. So a very warm welcome to the PASS. Please join us.
Thank you for that. And also ICVT, International Congress of Voice Teachers Symposium will be in Vienna as well, August 1st through 5th. So I hope to see a lot of people there. I know I'll be there, and hopefully John will be there as well. Jan, would you like to share a little of your beyond the bio?
Mm-hmm.
And Jan, will you, or Christian, will you stop sharing your screen? That would be.
I'm still sharing, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right there. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so my history is, in fact, I like music since I was a very little boy, and I was singing also. I started to have a group when I was like 15. I I went into a music group. I started to compose my own songs. And one of the things that really struck my attention was the voice breaks. Of course, when you're going through the puberty, and when you're a boy, you're experiencing this quite heavily. And I wanted to know what's happening there. So I went to take some singing lessons, and the answer I got was, okay, well, your voice breaks because you sing bad. So just learn it and then your voice will not break. And well, I guess that was true, but that was not a satisfying answer. So I just started to search for the answers myself. And when I went to a university, I happened to have a supervisor. Actually, I went to university to study physics and optics. But one of the supervisors that I had was also interested in voice and speech. So he introduced me into research. His name was Josef Pešák. And with him, I could sort of touch the basics of voice research. And I also started to do my own research on the voice breaks. And in fact, I never stopped the research. I never stopped doing the research. And one of the biggest discoveries that I had at that time was, in fact, that the answer is not completely known. That nobody exactly knows why the voice breaks, because there are multiple possibilities what can be happening. And although we know much more here at this present time, still there is not a unified theory which would put it all together and explain everything. So we still have some things to do. So I guess that's my history.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, today we're going to talk about the snake pit of voice pedagogy. And as a way of launching our conversation, I want to read the description for this chat. A conversation about registration amongst voice teachers facilitates a lively, sometimes frustrating, always enriching discussion. Although research is ongoing, voice science has shed a great deal of light on this topic over the past few decades. In the 21st century, what is it that voice teachers need to know about registration in order to inform their choice of terminology and application in the studio setting? And Christian, you had a thought about that description that I think is a great launching point today.
Yeah, and it's not so much, or it's equally a thought and an apology, basically, because people, it's my impression at least, and as I said, I've been working as a teacher myself for quite a few years, and you need simple answers, simple concepts, and quick fixes in the studio, because there is limited time, there is a limited patience also sometimes. And what I learned mostly from writing these articles is that the topic is vastly complex. Also, as Jan has said, unfortunately there are not the simple answers that we would like to hear, and that's equally a statement as it is an apology to the community. It's not as easy as we would like. And going even further, I would say oversimplification carries a huge danger with that. And for instance, how many registers are there? I sometimes do this in presentations and ask people, and then we get answers from 0 to 5. Now I have, and I think it's even featured in those two articles. I had a student who had 5 voice breaks regularly. Now, if you have 5 voice breaks, you should have 6 registers. And that just doesn't work, right? Because that's covered by no theory on this earth. So there must be more things to this than just saying like a dichotomy, or there is 3 registers and they are called like this. It's much more complex. And I think one of the greatest dangers in the topic is oversimplification. And if I may go on, there we have a problem, because on the one side, so I can still wear both hats in a sense. The one is a pedagogue and the one is a scientist. And at the one side, there is a very clear need to get things right and to learn people to sing well and healthily. And on the other side, there is still the great unified theory is still lacking, as Jan said. So in a sense, we're drilling a tunnel through a mountain, and we haven't met yet from both sides. So there is so much to do, and if we turn this mountain, if we are lucky, we're actually our trajectories are actually meeting, because it could be that we're going that way, and then we have crossed and we have to backtrack. And I think this happens over and over and over again in the dialogue between pedagogues on the one side and scientists on the other.
I love that. You know, as I said to you yesterday, I oftentimes think, okay, scientists, give me the answers that I need so I can do my job, right? And what we talked about yesterday is some of these answers aren't clear. That, you know, it's not like you guys are holding the secret and not sharing it with we people that are voice teaching. You know, there's, like you said, we're still trying to meet. So, John, why don't you launch us off with one of your questions?
Well, sure. I want to mention something from part one of Christian's most recent article, but I actually want to throw the question to Jan. So Christian, in the part one article, this is on page 178, talks about the perception of registers being a multidimensional phenomenon. You know, we have fundamental frequency, or as which we, you know, perceive as pitch, and spectrum, which we perceive as timbre, and sound level, which we perceive as loudness. But registers themselves are very multidimensional in terms of the production side. And, you know, subglottic pressure, intrinsic muscle activity, what's going on, resonances above and below the glottis, and the interaction of all those. And I guess I want to pitch this to Jan, you know, since you've been looking at all of these voice transitions, particularly the ones that are kind of involuntary. Could you talk a little bit about some of the multiple dimensions of voice production and registers?
Yeah, that can take quite some time.
Well, maybe the 5-minute version rather than the 15-minute.
Okay, well, I need to be very careful where to start. Okay, so let's take into account two things. So we have the vocal folds and we have the vocal tract. And then there is an interaction between these, and there is also an interaction between the vocal folds and the subglottal tract, which is basically the windpipe going down to the lungs. And all these can play a role in terms of the registers and register transitions. The vocal folds themselves, at this moment, we know that the register phenomena are intrinsic to the tissues of the vocal folds. So, and that's related to the fact that the tissue of the vocal fold is also very complex. We have different layers. The different layers have different properties, and sometimes we can have only the cover vibrating. Sometimes there is also the body vibrating. And actually, to make a smooth control between the cover and cover plus the body is not easy because of the body having different properties than the cover. So that's sort of one inherent problem that we have there. And in fact, we know if we use excised larynx experiments that the breaks just appear there. Only when you try to elongate the vocal folds very smoothly, and you can see that very nicely in Vandenberg movie. There is a very famous part where he only takes the vocal folds, puts the air through, and he starts to elongate very, very slowly. And when and the pitch is going up very slowly, and then suddenly jumps. And and he didn't do anything abrupt. It just happened abruptly. So that's one of the things that things sometimes happen abruptly, even though we are not doing anything which is abrupt. So that's one very important thing to consider. And secondly, we know that the vocal tract can do a lot of things, and you can have trouble producing some registers with some vowels. And at this moment, we know that the vocal tract really can influence the way the vocal folds vibrate. So that adds on top of the inherent instability. And one more thing, the subglottal tract can also add on top of that. So we have to disentangle all of these phenomena, and that actually process is not easy, because sometimes it's really difficult to say, okay, this is only the vocal folds or this is only the vocal tract, because we are living human beings. We have everything integrated, so we can have all kinds of different opinions, but if we do not have a scientific proof where, for instance, we do the excised laryngeal experiments without the vocal tract or without the subglottal tract even, that's one of the things that we are trying to do. Only these experiments actually can sort of give us the clue how things are happening, and still a lot of things have to be done.
Jan, what was the video that you referenced, or who was the video?
Oh, that's Vandenberg video. Maybe actually, maybe we can go on, and I can. In some minutes, I can figure it out where it is, and then I can show my screen and show it. I think that would be quite interesting to do. So just go on, and then I'll come back.
That's wonderful. Christian, I really loved how you broke down, and you started with sensation from the singer's side, and then perception from not only the singer but the external listener, and then the physiology, the acoustics, and then the implications. And so I really like the sequence in which you did that. I noticed that you chose to kind of follow Donald Miller's use of familiar terms that are in wide use, chest, falsetto, fry, whistle, but to describe or define them clearly, because the problem isn't just what terms to use, but it's agreeing on what they mean and the phenomena that they refer to. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's our greatest problem that we have when we talk to each other. So my personal opinion is I'm not married to these terms. We could call them the red register and the blue register, or whatever. What's your favorite color? It doesn't matter, just as long as we're trying to conceptualize what we mean by that and what is going on those different levels in the production. What does the singer feel? What do we hear? Which is absolutely important, because it's the end product. We don't sing for a spectral analyzer. We sing for human ears, and that is, of course, our perception is different than the physical reality. And then we have to talk about production. And if we're very, very lucky, there is even a connection between production and perception, but it is not always the case. So, and if I may say, so this goes beyond the bio as well. I'm a huge fan of Terry Pratchett's, and I just happened to read a passage from Pyramids, and where he talks about human nature, basically, and he says, change the name of a thing and you change the thing itself. And I found this very remarkable, and I thought, I'm gonna quote this today, because that's really at the heart of this. And let's say you have a very strong connotation with a certain term. Okay, then it's difficult to talk to somebody else who has a different, very strong connotation to the same term. And think of the head register. You mentioned Don Miller, and he defines the head extension in the male upper range as basically chest voice with some vocal tract adjustments. So and that comes as a surprise, because for many people would say head register is not chest, it's the one above the chest register. So we see we are in deep waters already, and for that reason, I kind of, and I stress the terms kind of, like Roubaud's suggestion of the M's, so M0, 1, 2, 3, and somebody proposed, my colleague Mike Edgerton proposed an M4, for the reason, and I think I quote this because this really deserves a quote, where he distinguishes overall production from the laryngeal mechanism, and I think that's nice. I don't agree on the finer points about the voix mixed, because in that terminology, there is no way for a truly mixed register. It always has to be in M1 or M2. But otherwise, this is brilliant, because it brought us a whole new set of terms that are fresh, and we could start again, basically.
Okay, I was wondering if maybe get you both involved in talking about vibratory modes. In particular, I mean, we talk about the 1-0, which is the medial lateral direction, and then the 1-1, which is where we have, the phase difference between the inferior and superior surfaces. So could you speak a little bit about that? Maybe start with Jan, and maybe then hand off to Christian.
Yeah, okay. Let me share first the link to Van den Berg movie, because in fact it is on the YouTube. I have to find a way how to share it, how to put it into the chat. So
If you,
oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, this one.
Okay, you can also share your screen if you would like to, Jan.
Okay.
But
Yes. I think I will first do the Van den Berg, then go back to the. Okay, this is the.
oh, let me share it, everybody. Oh.
Okay, now there it is. There it should be.
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, the chat window is blocking my view, but hopefully it's not blocking yours.
You can scoot it over. Just click on the top of it and scoot it, and then you'll be able to see.
Yeah, okay.
And while we're waiting for this, I think what is so remarkable about this is that there is no thyroarytenoid muscle contraction, because we always think, based on a couple of myographic studies, that it is the contraction of the CT muscle that is solely responsible for chest versus, let's call it falsetto, or M1 versus M2. But in an excised larynx, there are typically no, there is no innervation of the muscles, so the TA cannot contract there.
Do you see the video and also the sound?
We didn't hear sound, but we saw it run for a little bit.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
You see this?
Yes. Yeah, it ran for a little while.
Okay,
okay,
the sound is a little bit weak.
That's.
But this is. Yeah, so this is the chest register with stroboscopy.
Right, the mucosal wave on the superior surface.
And now it went into falsetto just abruptly. Yeah. So yeah, we are shortening the vocal folds slowly, and suddenly there will be a jump. Okay, now we have the chest register again. And yeah, the sound, when you play the movie with the link that I provided, you can listen to it more carefully and really watch it. This was one of the most fascinating things when I started my research to watch. So basically it just proves that the registers are inherent to the vocal folds.
John, there's a question. I think this might be a good time for Dan Mitten's question. So let me ask this and then we'll move forward. Is it worth the effort to always distinguish between laryngeal vibratory modes, ribot, etc., and registration, which necessarily involves acoustic factors acting on those mechanistic labels? Do you think it adds clarity or complication to keep these two ideas separate and distinct?
That's not an easy question. But as Christian said, oversimplification is dangerous. The acoustics is a real part of the registration phenomena, and also the mechanics is the part of the registration phenomena, and we just have to consider all of these to be able to figure it out. And it's not, maybe in some time we'll be able to simplify things, but we're not yet at the level where we should say, okay, this is it. That's sort of my answer at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to distinguish the transitions that are vocal tract shaping oriented or driven by that vocal tract shaping, you know, the tenor baritone bass extension, the transition around D5 to F5 in treble voices, the transition up probably around C6 in treble voices, you know, those being vocal tract oriented, and those that are more voice source oriented, which is the, you know, the chest falsetto dichotomy, the M1, M2. And I mean, as a teacher, I think that it's really helpful for me to keep what is the primary factor involved in this transition that I'm hearing in the production. Would you agree with that, Christian, Jan?
Yes, and absolutely, John. And in answer to Dan Mitten's question, I think there has to be a distinction between registration and mechanisms. Actually, mechanisms are a part of the whole that is called registration. And I've selected the examples in my two articles very carefully, and I would like to advertise to listen to them. Because one, and that is the example from Don Miller's book, gives us a perceptual thing where many people would say that's the register transition, and it's purely perceptual because we have the fourth harmonic jumping into a resonance, most likely. Well, we don't know about the vocal tract resonances unless we inject some noise, but I think it's a good guess in that first example. And in the second example, we have one of the transitions, and I think I call them transitions, and in nonlinear dynamic terms, you would call them bifurcations. That, well, if you look at the EGG waveform immediately before and immediately after this transition, it is just the same, which means, okay, there is some, whereas the first example is covered by linear source filter theory, the second example is covered by nonlinear source filter theory. So you really have some pressure from the vocal tract acting on the vocal folds in the wrong moment or in the wrong polarity that inhibits vibration at the particular fundamental frequency. So that is the vocal tract affecting the dynamics and actually the vibratory patterns of the vocal folds. So and you cannot separate these in that sense. So and as you say, John, I think it's paramount to try to understand what is the root of what is happening, because if it is a vocal tract thing, okay, we can change on we can work on the vowel color, for instance, and that way shift the resonances. And if it is a truly laryngeal thing, so if we can speculate, and of course in the studio it's always speculation because we cannot measure at that level. That is our problem. We can, if we can speculate that this is intrinsic, it concerns the intrinsic laryngeal muscles like the TA or maybe even the adduction settings, then we have to find exercises or explanations, approaches that actually target these muscles and the larynx without telling our student, of course, because that knowledge is only for the teacher and not for the students, because it would overburden any voice lesson. But it's about the diagnosing, right? So you ideally you have some at least some speculation as to what is going on at which pitches. And if I may, I had one student once that I taught and had the it was fantastic to see. She could not sing D5, pitch D5. There was just a hole in the voice range. So actually and then I tried, and I thought, okay, maybe this is a nonlinear interaction. So I tried changing the vowel colors, and first gradually and then radically, no change. And only if once we were able to move the vertical larynx position a little bit, actually those notes appeared, which means that we must have hit a subglottal resonance most likely. So as Jan said, it's all, this is the old Vandenberg thing. You have all those systems, and they are, each of them wants to vibrate in their own eigen frequency, right? And if you're very lucky, they are tuned to each other, and one fundamental frequency and thus one pitch emerges. But if they are not tuned to each other and not entrained well, you have different solutions and different possibilities at the same time, and that's when you get the frequency jumps, which are the hallmark of a register break, basically. So,
Christian, I was sorry, Theodora, you've addressed this a little bit, but let's just see if this facilitates a little bit more. She says, is it more valuable to work toward a grand unified theory of register production or register perception? Which might be more meaningful for voice pedagogues and scientists in order to understand how different registers function and how to train transitions between them based on style?
Yes, we need both of them. They are equally important. Sorry, Theodora, if you want a longer answer, please write it in the chat. But I think that's it. We have to look at both ends because the audience doesn't pay for good voice production. They pay for what they hear, in a sense. You know what I mean? And of course, good voice production is the basis for that. But that's the teacher's task to make sure that it works that way.
Jan, were you going to share more video? Otherwise, I'll have you not share the screen because I think
it's fine for now. We can continue the discussion when needed. I can share again.
Okay, go ahead and unshare then. So I think it makes a difference.
I didn't know that I have to unshare. Okay, I have to find where that is.
Oh, gosh. In the sharing box, it'll say stop showing.
There it is. Yeah, okay, here it is.
There we go.
I'm quite new to the GoToWebinar thing, so sorry for that.
It seems like a good place to talk about perceptual training then. How do we train our ears to differentiate these vocal tract adjustment things from voice source adjustments? What are some things that you guys might suggest for doing that? I have a few myself, but I'd love to hear what you have. Who wants to jump at that one?
Christian, that's probably you are more into the vocal pedagogy than me. So.
I knew that. I think it's not only the hearing, it's the interpretation of what we hear, what is so important, and it has to be about combinations of vowels and fundamental frequencies, where we know where harmonics pass through resonances, There is charts. I think Ken Bozeman did wonderful work before him, Don Miller, and I think even Burton Coffin. It goes back to that. And I'm sorry if I forgot other people. A lot of people worked on this, and they deserve all the credit. That is the one thing, and it is informed listening. Of course, you need to understand the concepts. You need to understand at what pitch and at what combination of pitch and vowel do you get which harmonic. But I think that's not all, because that first example I mentioned from Don Miller's book, if you didn't have the EGG evidence, which is a physiological evidence, non-invasive, but it's from the larynx, you would never know, you would never guess. And I think we need to be prepared for that. And then to put it even to stretch this, I taught professionally at the Tölzer Knabenchor for 4.5 years, and that's a top class, world class boys choir. And those kids really can sing. But the cool thing is they are kids with smaller vocal folds and particularly smaller vocal tracts. And I was so surprised. I had this one guy, it sounded like falsetto or head or whatever you want to call it. But he had a chest voice up to F5 or something. And nobody would guess it. And it was only when I saw the EGG evidence. So the point there is, and going back to adults, I know quite a few sopranos, for instance, they think they sing in chest voice, but they don't. They don't know, they have never found their chest voice. Some not even in speaking. So I think you have to tease these things out, not because everybody has to sing in their chest voice necessarily, but in order to make the difference, to see, this is this and this is this. And the last point is everybody sounds different. Our laryngeal anatomy is so individual, and we've seen this. Jan, I hope you can join in there when we did those experiments in Groningen in 2006, when we talked about adducted versus non-adducted chest and falsetto. So we had the four possibilities, and what somebody singing on the same pitch, same vowel in not so much adducted chest voice would sound just like the next person in fully adducted falsetto, and vice versa. So from the hearing, this is very hard if you don't provide a set of exercises and really try around and see where are the breaks if we provoke them. Not that everybody should sing with breaks unless they're Austrians and yodel, but even in the studio, provoke the breaks, and then we see where they are and what is laryngeal and what is not.
Great answer.
I'm wondering also, technology enhanced perceptual training, guided listening using, I think in like a pedagogy class, guided listening with a spectrograph, or if you have EGG, listening and looking at the signals. Of course, the more recent version of Voce Vista, you can go in and just listen to particular bands. You can put in filters and, okay, I only want to listen to stuff below 1,000 hertz, or I want to listen, up at 2,500 to 4,000. I can listen to a particular band. Simulation programs where you can, mess with the spectral slope and get used to, okay, that's the equivalent of, increasing my TA, as I'm making it a shallower slope. And so are there other things that you might suggest in terms of other kinds of training things? I mean, obviously just listen to lots of singers, but what else might you suggest?
Yeah, I think the Voce Vista is a wonderful tool, and Don Miller really spent his life trying to figure out what is the best for the singers to look at. So the combination of the spectrography with the EGG signal, I think, provides a very, very good source of information for singers to learn about their own voice. And indeed, I think the technology is far ahead of our knowledge. So a lot of information is there that we don't understand is there. So, and only time and patience and diligence can resolve these things. So we really have to learn by doing things.
Mm.
I think that's the best thing, and different people can have different ways. Each of us are different. So for somebody, the voce vista could work. For somebody else, only the listening is good enough. But whenever there is a possibility to find more and understand more, I certainly very much recommend it. And it really, that's the way to get rid of the sort of battles between different opinions. Opinions are just opinions, but we need to know the facts, and the facts are missing very much so still. So once we know the phenomena, then we can apply them to the things that are known from voice pedagogy. Yeah, to me that's the key.
There are a couple questions around this perception. Let me put those out there. Donna Marie asks, how does a singer know if they are singing in pressed phonation or they are singing in chest or mix? And then adjacent to that, Courtney Anna says, can we even assess through listening alone high closed quotient versus high level 1 inertant singing? So we can take this one at a time, or
Yeah, it's tough. So about the pressedness, well, it's again, try to go for the other extreme, make the counter example. If you can stay in the same register and go breathy, and we've shown this that everyone, both trained and untrained people, have these capabilities to produce all the 4 extremes, like a breathy chest, a non-breathy chest, a breathy falsetto, and a non-breathy falsetto. So that's it's always like navigate the space, and it's by doing. It's not by listening, because people really sound fundamentally different sometimes, and that is frustrating actually. And it even goes for EGG. So I think EGG is a fantastic tool, and so electroglottography, where you put 2 electrodes here on the larynx, and a very small current is going through, and it gives us like an equivalent of the relative vocal fold contact area. And I've devoted a lot of time and energy to working and doing science with EGG. And what frustrates me most is that is the individuality of people. So what we see, for instance, in EGG wavegrams, you cannot generalize it. You can only establish this is this mechanism or mode and it likely correlates with a certain laryngeal configuration by just mapping the entire space. And then we found it for one person, and the next person is completely different and has a completely different evidence. And so again, apologies, there is no simple solution. I know it's
I love this idea though, Christian, that your answers today are
I have one more example.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one more example from an experiment that we did very recently. We had a singer, a female singer, who is very experienced doing different registers, and she's very skilled doing sort of chest-like versus head-like registers across many pitches. And we did a perceptual experiment where she always sang the same pitch with 2 different registers. And we took these examples and had people listen and distinguish the 2 registers and assign, okay, is is this likely the chest register or is this the head register? And even the singer herself was not correct on all the examples. So this is the situation. The hearing is really, it can be confusing. You can be misled. You lose the attention. Suddenly you hear something else. From day by day, you can hear slightly different things. It's very, very subjective, and we have to be very careful at using the perception. Of course, it's still the most fundamental tool, but be aware of the subjectivity, that you could hear different things day by day, and different people can at the same time hear different things.
Mhm. And I love Christian's idea about if you're not sure, or even if you are sure, have them make the opposite sound. If they're pressed, have them make breathy. If they're chest, have them make head. I often do that in lessons just so that they can feel the shift as well. And then I can hear perceptually my subjective, assessment of what I'm hearing. So that's very interesting, Christian, coming from you. I find that fascinating.
Thanks. Yeah, I would even go further. Like if you don't know what the register is, try to produce a break, even though you're a classical singer and a break is what you never would do, but just to understand your voice. One or two voice breaks don't hurt actually if you yes. don't yell at the top of your voice. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
That maybe then leads us to talking about the mixed voice. Number one, do we? Is there 1.2 or 1.5 or 1.7 if you want to use the numbering system? I think in particular with CCM, musical theater singing, and also high frequency piano singing in the tenor, baritone, bass voices. So have at it, gentlemen. Is there a mixed voice?
Well, there is still a possibility. Yeah, you can have different, the muscles can be adjusted smoothly. So in that sense, you can do smooth adjustments and try to do something in the middle, lighter chest or heavier falsetto. So there is, even you can have different strategy with the vocal folds and with the vocal tract. The vocal tract can be tuned to more chest-like singing, but you can use sort of falsetto-like mechanism to produce. So certainly there are these options. The big question is whether we are really able to achieve very smooth transition. Some people can, some people may not be able to do that. But I do not. I do agree that there is a possibility of mixing. Yeah.
I think back, and Jan, you may remember this when we were working with Ingo. He talked about the thicker mucosa being something he wished he had. If you could have something, be born with something, what would it be? And he would always say thicker mucosa, because then have more ability to have a stable vibratory pattern while you're near one of these transition areas, and that ability to, well, is it A or is it B, or is it A plus B, or is it A minus B, being able to kind of live in that in-between zone. What do you say to something like that? I mean, that's something that unfortunately we can't train. We either have that or we don't.
True.
I mean, I remember having a male student who he literally could be singing abducted falsetto, very light, and in a span of say 6 seconds go into a completely full operatic ringing tone, very, very seamless on just about any vowel, almost throughout his entire range. I hated the guy. You know, just had phenomenal control over going back and forth the grid that you guys have made. You know, transitioning from one to another very, very smoothly. And I always thought, how does he do that? You know, just in envy, if anything else.
I want to make sure
Kristen, you,
knows you're talking about the adjustments of glottal configuration 2014. I can't believe it was that long ago that article came out, because it was so kind of revelatory. People really still talk about that significance of that article. So that was JOS 70, and it's in the chat box.
Kristen, what about you and mixed voice? I know in the article you say you know, there are some who argue that, you know, we really can't, and yet there's evidence. I know you cited something of Matthias Echternach's, some evidence. Right, yeah, I'm just thinking that's in the first part of the article. You're talking about that on 181 and 182. So what do you think about the whole idea of the mixed voice?
I think it is a possibility. First of all, we have to distinguish between, are we judging this perceptually, or are we talking about the production? And perceptually, yes, we can all agree there's guys who can do this. And in the production, I would say, yes, it is a possibility. And what I like is the cusp catastrophe. Now we're going into deep nonlinear dynamics territory, but it's basically a three-dimensional space, which gives you as a third dimension, and I would call it the ability to mix. And of course, the $100,000 or $1 million question is, what is that precisely? But can you transverse the space from between those two vibratory states linearly, or does it have to be like this hysteresis effect that for instance, we saw in Vandenberg's larynx without any laryngeal fine control? And probably the answer lies in how well can somebody access the biomechanical properties of the different layers of the vocal folds, and how well can he or she support this with the vocal tract. And now I have to open a bracket, because now again we have to talk about nonlinear interaction and even go further. And if I may advertise, Jan and I and three other very smart people are, well, those are smart, me not, but Jan is, are working on a review article where we try to put in the myoelastic aerodynamic theory and the source filter theory, both the linear and the nonlinear extension, and put this all into context, because it basically looks at the same thing, maybe from slightly different angles. And what you need for self-sustained oscillation in the vocal folds is 2 degrees of freedom. So you need a lateral medial vibratory component, and as you said, John, you need that 1-1 mode, so that but that 1-1 mode can be supplied also by a well-tuned vocal tract. So it's basically requirement 1 is you need that mode, and all vocal folds can do that. And if either you have that, and then most likely, I believe, the vocal folds do not care so much about what the vocal tract does. So those are the singers who can get away with a lot as regards vowel color. And then there are the one who maybe have a thinner mucosa and don't have such a strong rotational mode just by nature, and they have to minutely tune the vocal tract in order to support certain phenomena, particularly in the passaggio. And I think this is often overlooked in the discussion. And the main thing about what we're talking here is the coupling strength between the source and the filter. And to my best knowledge, there is one theoretical study about this by a Brazilian guy, I think, called Lucero, very smart paper. But we have to date no way to empirically kind of quantify this or measure this in people. We can just look at the phenomena, how they occur. So of course, somebody who has this strong vibratory component has a very stable voice source per se. And then if that guy, if that woman or man is able to gradually fade this in or out, this translational component, then probably you have a very nice continuum between what we could call chest and falsetto. And just as an anecdote, I recently, that was a nice event where we had like a live teaching situation with endoscopy, with flexible endoscopy for an audience of some 50 people. And we had a singer, when she changed from falsetto to chest, her larynx height, her vertical larynx position literally jumped by 1.5 centimeters. So of course, if you have boundary conditions that change so drastically between the registers, you're never going to be able to smoothly adjust that. And the other thing is, of course, it probably also has to do with adjustment of the closing, the closed quotient. So if you are in a very, and this is where adduction comes in and really unfortunately complicates the whole phenomenon. So you're in chest voice with a lot of adduction, and then what particularly amateurs do is they switch to falsetto mode or M2, and they get rid of the adduction because everything is innervated by the same nerves, all the relevant muscles. So they let go of everything, and then you have an abrupt change of closed quotient from, I don't know, 50-60% to 15 or something. And of course, that's not going to sit well with your larynx. So it's about the gradual adjustment. So with the same muscles innervated by the recurrent laryngeal nerve, one muscle has to do more, and one or two muscles have to do less at the same time, very gradually, or vice versa. And that is very hard to train and to navigate. And think of pedagogical or therapeutic concepts, how to sell this or establish this in somebody. This is really hard.
Let me come in with a couple questions. There's some good questions that have come in. Some you've already talked around, but sometimes the questions facilitate a different approach. Dan Mitten, on page 350 of Snake Pit Part 2, Herbst says that chest registers is more robust and less influenced by vocal tract resonances than the falsetto register. This suggests to me that low male voices who spend their classical performance lives in M1, for example, don't worry so much about formant harmonic interactions.
May I take this one? Because yes, basically from a laryngeal mechanics point of view, this is just what I said, because in chest register, typically you have a strong translational or rotatory mode. And if I may advertise something, I'm currently with Brad Story working on a theoretical paper, which hopefully is going to be accepted at the Voice Foundation meeting in end of May or beginning of June. Where we show, and it's a no-brainer in a sense. If you sing low, and you can even show this with Made, you have lots of harmonics equally spaced. And what we want to do is, and what I'm saying here answers the question on a purely linear source filter theory level. What we want to achieve, particularly in classical not amplified singing, is to produce some energy somewhere between 2000 and 5000 hertz, or 2000 and 4000 hertz, because this is where our ear is most sensitive, and this is where the orchestra doesn't have a lot of energy, unless you have lots of brass and things. So the question is, how do we get there? And as a low voice, well, we need lots of strong overtones in order to actually reach that level of 2000 hertz. Because if I'm singing a low G and then the fundamental frequency is 100 hertz, then it's my 20th overtone or 19th overtone that actually has 2000 hertz. So I need a very strong voice source. And on the other hand, I don't have to care so much about resonance tuning, because some of my harmonics are gonna hit the resonances anyway, particularly at very low singing. Whereas on the other side, if I am singing like C, what is that, C6, has approximately 1000 hertz fundamental frequency. So it's my first overtone, it's my second harmonic that hits 2000 hertz. So all I got to do is actually amplify that, or even amplify the fundamental, particularly if I'm the queen of the night and even sing higher. So I don't have to care so much about the flatness or the steepness of the spectral components that I produce in the larynx, but I have to be really careful about resonance tuning. So, and I think this is inherent to low and low and high voices. And now I'll give away the pun, or what do you say, the punchline of the whole talk. If you're a singer and you've never transcended your own singing technique, you probably have a hard time teaching somebody who sings at the other end of the pitch range, because they will most likely need some totally different strategies for producing good classical singing.
Well, would you say also then there's much to be learned if you are a classically oriented teacher from doing some cross-training and understanding what people who sing more contemporary styles do, because there's obviously some things to be learned in terms of, wow, I didn't realize my voice could also do that. And that opens you up to other potential, you know, as you were saying, you know, getting outside of just your own experience. So does that make sense for you from a teaching standpoint as well?
Absolutely, amen to that, John. On three levels actually, because firstly, registration is differently, because people in CCM are changing the registers on different pitches as classical singers. Secondly, resonant or formant tuning strategies are different, and we have nice papers about this, about these two, and also about the third thing I'm going to say is also the voice source is going to be different, because we in CCM we have all those grunts, growls, and screams and subharmonics and all these effects that could either be done in a really devastating way for your voice when you try to imitate them just with your vocal folds, or you use additional structures for all those effects, and then it's probably a little bit healthier. So absolutely, yeah.
Courtney Ennis has an interesting question. Could a long, narrow epilarynx and/or pharynx shape contribute to physiological giftedness via a more even inertogram as much as thicker mucosa?
I think yes, it's certainly a very good hypothesis. It has not been proven to be true, but I would say, yeah, it's a very good hypothesis that can become true. Yeah.
That could be modeled. You could model that and test it.
Right.
Okay, if Ingo, if you're listening, put that in your simulator.
And then here's another from Stacy. Have you looked at vibrato excursion in terms of higher register predominance versus lower register predominance?
No.
No.
If I can jump in, I mean, I've had discussions, I mean, vibrato is a big thing for me, with Ingo about, you know, when we're at the extremes of our range, you know, we have one of the intrinsic pitch affecting muscles acting practically maximally and the other one doing very little, you know. So if we're singing a high F6 or something like that, there's probably not a lot of TA involved and a lot of cricothyroid activation, while if I'm singing a low F2, it's going to be the opposite. You know, it's going to be TA and very, very little activity in the CT. And at both of those extremes, you don't typically hear people sing with a lot of vibrato. You know, and he was saying, you know, it's where we have some sense of dynamic balance between the two, that we hear the vibrato much more and less so at the extremes, because you either have, you know, maximal stretch where the tension is being borne by the vocal ligament, or that it's, you know, you've got the TA shortening and bulking up to the point, you know, where you're not going to get a lot of that, even if the cricothyroid was very active there. You know, you're not going to, you've got a lot of opposition to that subtle change in length and tension that is involved in frequency vibrato. I hope I explained that well.
Good, you explained it really well, John. Yeah. Let me get another question in here. This takes us a little different direction from Umit. Wanting to know what Jan and Christian think the role of the central system on transition. What is the role of the central systems? Any study? Based on discussion here, transitions are fast motor actions, sudden change. In this case, do you think that the central system may also require fast feedback, e.g. auditory, proprioceptive, and/or visual, to update the internal program feed forward? Also, do the instruments we use to visualize transitions, are they sensitive enough to show these details? And she thanks you in advance for
Is that from Heidi Moss?
No, actually it's from Umit.
Okay.
I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Please forgive me.
Well, indeed, we do not know much about the role of the central nervous system in registered transition, but for sure it should have a very important role, because it basically all the muscles are coordinated through the central nervous system. I think I vaguely remember there were a few studies with brain imaging, but certainly it was just sort of initial look into the complex problem, so we don't know too much. Regarding the speed, I think the registers, it's more about very subtle control, and once there is an abrupt phenomenon, that's already something that very often we don't want, especially in classical singing. Once the register break happens, it can be very unpleasant for a classical singer. It can be very good for country singer, on the other hand. But it's the way about having an idea, actually controlling the instability is important, to know whether the instability is there and whether we can avoid it or whether we can allow it. And that's, to me, it's not a matter of the speed of the central nervous system. It's just a way of being aware that this could happen and being in control whether we let it happen or not. Christian, what about your opinion?
Yeah, I think this is, if you look at what people do and marvelously do, most of them are still looking at pitch shift effects, for instance. That's
like
essential.
Chuck Larson's work, yeah.
And his group and others in neurology and so on. So, but if you think of what is the there is so much more than pitch in singing is one thing, and the other is actually it's a register break is chaos in the sense it is right at the heart of chaos theory, and as Jan said, it's a bifurcation. So the bifurcation is defined by the fact that you gradually shift boundary conditions, and if you exceed a certain critical point, then you get this abrupt reaction from the system. So the break itself is not neurally controlled. I'm not saying I'm gonna break now. Maybe you can feel it through proprioception, but it's always a very, very gradual thing. so the timing, I think, is not so much important. And let me go a little bit to animal bioacoustics, because I think this is fantastic, or to me, it's very interesting. So animals typically don't have the cognitive abilities, and sometimes, or in most cases, not even the neural setup to actually have fine control on the larynx at the level that we have that. And those actually, so it's a very limited syntax that they produce, but they rely on the flexibility and on the complexity of the periphery of the system for creating all those breaks and and it's an integral part of their voice production. Whereas and you also see this in infants. Infants are still doing this, but then as soon as we learn to babble and then to talk, we learn to avoid the instabilities in speech, and it's fantastic. And we can do this because we have a fine, much better control over the entire system. So maybe that is some stimulating thought.
Just want to make sure as we get ready to wrap up, there's a couple more. I want to go back just a little bit when we first started talking about mixed voice for just a moment, because there were some questions, comments that came in that I think are the way of that voice teachers think about mixed voice, and you've answered around it, of course, but I want to ask it in this way. There are different opinions on what mixed voice is. Some say it's M2 plus twang, others say it's M1 with reduced activation of the TA, and some say it does not exist, and so on. Could you talk a little bit more about your opinion of what mixed voice is in terms of vocal mechanism and vocal tract influence?
I've tried avoiding voicing my opinion, because I think that is a luxury we have in science, that we can doubt, and that sometimes if something is not proven, we just say we don't know. I know this is frustrating, again, the apology, but I think the opinion is, I believe that the opinion is not a good thing. So in that sense, and the other thing is, and maybe some people might not like what I say here. I often hear this just listen to this. This is a TA dominant mix, and this is a CT dominant mix. And I always would go, okay, how do you know? Because our theory of what we think is the control of the registers, as in TA contraction and relaxation, is on very, very, very thin empirical grounds. So we have the series of studies by Hirano and Venard and Ohala from the early 70s. And we have some recent or more recent studies by Kochis-Jennings. And I think that sums it up. We don't have anything more. And those are only punctual studies. So I'm always very careful in saying this, because we just need more data. We need more empirical evidence before we can say this. We have a few very good models, but a model is not a proof. The empirical data is the proof of the model, actually. And until we don't have the data, we have to say, okay, we can hypothesize that. Apologies for this.
I would say that all of the options that were mentioned are still possible, because we don't know.
Yeah.
I think, you know, from the practical pedagogical level, some of the exercises that have been used for centuries really on registers, messa di voce, gliding on, you know, a single vowel very slowly. Those kinds of things still hold true today as the best way, and you have to be very patient with yourself, and also there tend to be, I mean, because they're emotionally often difficult, because you make some pretty squawky sounds sometimes when you're just trying to very easily move from one thing to another, and suddenly, as you know, we've been talking about, you get, you know, and it jumps on you, and also that you have to kind of limit the amount of time of doing that, because it can be very fatiguing mentally, I think, as well as physically. But some of those classic exercises of the messa di voce and the pitch glides, and using the SOVTs are some of our best ways to explore that differential control that seems to be our goal in a variety of singing styles, being able to go from one of the quadrants to another for an emotional reason. You know, if I'm Violetta in the third act of Traviata and I have, you know, tuberculosis, I'm probably going to have a little breathier sound. You know, and being able to do that as an artistic choice, and having the control to be able to do that volitionally, and then tap into, you know, okay, now I have to rise to this climax here and call back on my, you know, my more adducted falsetto or whatever. So any thoughts on other pedagogical means to explore that gray area between some of these modes?
Yeah, I want to try a second answer, which is maybe less defensive, and this is just my humble personal opinion and experience in teaching. What always works for me in classical singing is try to make the change between M1 and 2 at a lower pitch, have a vowel that is closed, and sing softer. And of course, so that piggybacks on the softy kind of thing. Of course, that's limited because sometimes you wanna be able to sing a fortissimo with a fortissimo open vowel in the region of passaggio. So there is limits to that. And the other thing is, it's my opinion. I believe, for instance, if you look at CVT, they have those 4 modes. My hunch is that the 2 more heavier modes, for instance, and they never talked about this. I suggested they made a study about this. My hunch is that the 2 heavier modes only work on certain very precisely tuned vowels, where the vowel color has to change with pitch, because there is some huge degree of interaction, probably source filter interaction going on. Is my guess, and I bet 20 euros.
It is mentioned in the book.
Yeah, is it okay? Yeah, but I think they didn't provide empirical data yet, did they? I cannot think of a study. But that's the point. I mean, you have some types of singing where you really can say, okay, tune the vowel to that. And then you'll get that mix, kind of, whether you call it head mix or chest mix or TA dominant or not. But if you have and I'm going in circles here, if you have a strongly coupled vocal tract, then of course the pressure that comes back through from the vocal tract to the vocal folds can actually help get this kind of translational vibratory mode in place, even though you have started loosening up your TA, most likely, I speculate here, long time ago. And as soon as then you change the vowel, it just flips to the other mechanism. So maybe that helps.
There's a question that I wanted to get to, and the person asks, it seems that there are multiple strategies to employ registers to artistic ends. And at least this person asking the question says, you seem to be suggesting that there is a correct way to manage registers. Does this apply to classical singing and the notion of ideal voice? What about fostering vocal individuality? I would say that there are many ways in which to explore this, and it's going to be very individual since our anatomy is subtly different. There's going to be, you know, what works for singer 1 is not going to be the strategy that may work for singer 2 because of their the style of music they sing, and the training they've had, and their unique anatomy, and, you know, habits that they've developed in terms of vocal tract shaping from, you know, their speech and so on. So I think, and I sense that you both would agree that it's really a matter as a teacher of helping that student find the ideal way for them to be expressive and to navigate their voice. Understanding the parameters that are at play, though, is fundamental to that.
Yes.
So if I, in any statement, made the impression that I think there is one correct way to navigate the registers, I apologize, because that was never my intention, actually. As
I don't
John
remember.
said, I'm completely with you, John, on this one.
Jan, what were you saying? Go ahead.
I also don't remember that we would be saying this in our publications, that there is one strategy to deal with this. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, what a wonderful discussion. Oh, go ahead, Christian.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, because I think so it's something I stumbled upon recently. It's Hume's law, or the is and ought problem. And if we do science, we try to explain how things are, and maybe we succeed or we fail. But we should never, while doing science, say that just because we can explain a phenomenon like this, it should be like this. So I think that is that we have to be humble. We have to be careful in what we do.
Well, that is a succinct and perfect way to end this conversation. I really cannot thank you enough, not only for today, of course, but for your incredible contribution to the voice profession. It's extraordinary. And I know these conversations will continue as we seek both scientific exploration and answers. And then, of course, what's important to me is the application of that in the studio. So I thank all of our attendees. I want to just let you know that our next NATS chat will be January 16th, and we'll be discussing contemporary vocal styles, demystifying the pedagogical process specifically for pop rock. So I hope you'll join us in the new year. And in the meantime, I wish everyone a wonderful holiday season. And thank you so much, Kristen and Jan, for joining us. And John Mix, thank you so much for co-hosting with me today. Have a wonderful December,
Thanks,
everyone.
Kari. This was great. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Goodbye, everyone.